Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Amicus Next Free Training Tuesdays webinar. This week, we're going to be focusing on the Outlook and Exchange links within Amicus Attorney for both email integration as well as calendar and contacts integration, respectively. And we're going to discuss some of the basics to ensure that you're able to set up and configure, as well as understand, in taking advantage of how to take advantage of these special features, and these very powerful features as well. My name is Darren Juby, and I'm a product trainer here at Abacus Next, with my focus being the Amicus Attorney product line. As we always do with these webinars, if anyone has any questions at all during our session today, please do feel free to utilize the questions feature here in GoToMeeting. And time permitting, we'll get to answering your question either during the session or towards the end. And if time does not permit us to do so, please do include your email address, and I'll happily follow up afterwards to provide you with the information that you're looking for. So now, without further ado, let us begin our basic overview of the Outlook and Exchange within Amicus Attorney. So just a brief agenda of the topics that we're going to be discussing and demonstrating over the course of the next hour. We're going to begin by doing an overview of the Amicus Attorney Outlook and Exchange email integration link. From there, we'll do an overview of the Amicus Attorney Outlook and Exchange calendar and contacts link. From there, we'll have a brief discussion in which I can hopefully impart some points upon all of you about Outlook versus Exchange and which one do you use. We'll then move along to setup within the firm settings. That'll be something that your administrator takes care of within Amicus Attorney, so that the rest of you can then proceed to utilize these links, and we'll then move along to the preferences so we can show you how to go about setting up those links respectively for email integration as well as calendar and contact synchronization. We'll also briefly touch upon how you go about disabling the links and how you would go about resetting the links. And of course, like I mentioned, we'll have questions at the end, time permitting. And as well, I will try to answer questions as we move along in the session. And Martha had a question here to begin things. Will the email storage actually be in Amicus Attorney, or will it just be a link back to the Outlook file? Thank you. Well, Martha, to answer your question as best as I can, the emails themselves will not be residing within Amicus Attorney. They will be in your inbox, whether that's through Microsoft Exchange or simply whatever type of email account you're accessing through Microsoft Outlook. Now, with all of that being said, if you do save and associate an email to a file within Amicus Attorney, well, then the body of text within that email is maintained within the database so that there is a record somewhere within there that contains the information that was within that email. So while the email itself is not saved, the contents of it are, is probably the best way that I can answer that question for you, Martha. And I hope that I've been able to do so. So moving along here, folks, we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion portion here to begin the session, and that's where we're gonna do, like I said, an overview of both the email integration link as well as the contacts and calendar link for both Microsoft Exchange and Microsoft Outlook here within Amicus Attorney. So to begin with, and you guys will see my splash screen has not changed. Oh, and you are quite welcome, Martha. Thank you. So to begin with, let's talk about the Amicus Attorney Outlook and Exchange email integration link. We'll do an overview of that. So my screen will not change here, folks, so please do not panic if you're noticing that the screen has not changed from the splash screen just yet. We will move along to within Amicus Attorney here in just a few moments. But to begin with, let's do this overview. So email integration with Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Exchange gives you the ability to view, save, and manage your emails, including the attachments, directly from within Amicus Attorney. So to kind of further go on what you had asked, Martha, we're able to view the emails and deal with them within Amicus, but again, they're not really stored within Amicus Attorney, I guess is the best way to put it. Now you can also configure this feature to automatically save emails to Amicus Attorney based on a variety of rules. Emails will appear in your communications module within Amicus Attorney. And there's an optional embedded Outlook view that's available for those who prefer the familiarity of that interface. Your email lists within Outlook will indicate whether an email has been saved to Amicus Attorney, whether it has been dealt with, and the name of the file, if any, that it is associated with. Amicus Attorney supports integration with either Outlook as a standalone, client-side integration, or Microsoft Exchange, which is a server-side integration. A configuration wizard will guide the Amicus administrator and the firm members through the steps that are necessary to set up and initialize the link. Information is provided on resetting the link and ensuring that the feature runs smoothly while you're doing it. Now, once configured, emails and their attachments can be accessed from within Amicus Attorney, and firm members can choose whether to save a copy of an email and/or its attachments as an Amicus record with associations to a file and/or a contact. Each firm member can configure their preferences to create these saved records automatically based on various rules. Now, there is the option of auto-saving email as well. I do believe I mentioned that previously here. As mentioned, each firm member can configure their email link, their email link preferences to specify that emails are automatically saved. And in doing so, inbox emails are auto-saved as Amicus email records when the sender, that the individual who is in the from field, matches A, one of your Amicus contact email addresses, or B, the email address of one of your specified firm members. Now, sent items emails are auto-saved as well as Amicus email records when the recipient, that being the individual in the to field, matches one of your Amicus contact email addresses. Attachments can also be optionally auto-saved, but this will occur only if there is a file that is associated with that particular email. Now, before we move along here, I do see that we have a couple of questions, so I will try to answer those in turn here. Sonia asked, once braided and saved to Amicus, are we required to save the email in Outlook forever, or can we delete it from Outlook? I don't know that I would recommend necessarily deleting the email. That's completely up to you. What you might want to do is just put it in a subfolder outside of your inbox or something along those lines. But again, once the email itself has been saved, you don't need to worry. Like I said earlier, it's the body of the email or the text that's contained within that email that is maintained within the email record that is created when you save and associate an email. So I hope that answers your question as best as I can, Sonia. I don't want to say yay or nay to that. I would leave that to personal preference. But quite frankly, if you were to delete the email, it's not going to have a negative impact once it has been saved. Now, Jose asks, will it integrate simultaneously with Outlook and Exchange? On a per user basis, that would be, you can have certain users that are on one or the other, but once you've made the change for the firm to be using Exchange moving forward, any new users that wanted to set up the link would have to go with Exchange. So if you started with using the Outlook standalone link and then gradually moved over to using the Exchange link, those that were on the Outlook link still could maintain that, but no new users could go for that. So it's kind of a yes and no as far as simultaneous integration is concerned, Jose. I hope that that answers your question as best as I can. Basically, if you're using Exchange, you're better off using the Exchange option versus the Outlook option for a variety of reasons that I will get into as we move along in this session. Misty asked, do you have to pay additional for this feature? How can I tell if this feature is activated or not? There is no additional fees for this feature. It's included as part of the program itself. And I will move along as we get done our overview discussions here to answer John's question as well. I will be demonstrating how to do all of this as well. It's not just a talking point. We are going to be doing the overviews first, and then we will get into the demonstration portion of things. So I hope that answers everybody's questions. You are welcome, by the way, Jose. And so moving along, we were talking about an overview of the email integration here. So synchronizations. Synchronizations will occur regularly depending upon your selected mode, either Outlook or Exchange, as follows. So if you're using the Outlook link for email, when you first enable the link through your preferences, the first synchronization is referred to as an initialization. Now, when you're logged into Amicus, it will automatically synchronize with Outlook based upon the optional sync period that you can specify at the time of setting up the link. You can also choose to synchronize now from the Amicus toolbar within the communications module. And if we were to reset the link, well then an another synchronization would occur at that time as well. Now, something to note here, folks, if Outlook is not already running when you do a synchronization from Amicus Attorney, it will start it automatically as a background process. So it might not necessarily show up in your taskbar as a running application, that being Outlook, of course. And any of your usual Outlook startup prompts, if any, would appear. Now, activity during the sync or deletion process is noted in the Amicus status bar. So again, these are all things that I will demonstrate as we move along. Steve, to answer your question, without having technical support investigate that, it could be one of a million different things. So I really can't speculate on that. That's something that if that issue was to occur again, I would suggest reaching out to technical support at that time to see if they can help you guys determine what caused it and what is needed to be done to resolve that. So moving along here, we were talking about Outlook as far as synchronization, so let's do the same thing in regards to Exchange. When the Amicus administrator first enables the link for you, again, that first synchronization will be referred to as an initialization. And then, if you're using Exchange for your email integration, then you will be automatically synchronizing on a regular polling interval, regardless of whether you are logged into Amicus Attorney and whether your local Outlook instance is running or not. When you choose Synchronize Now on the Amicus toolbar from within the Communications module, that will also force a synchronization. And if the Amicus administrator was to reset the link for you, that would also force a synchronization. So that is the Amicus, both Outlook and Exchange, email link in a very high-level basic overview. So let's do the same thing now for the Calendar and Contacts link, and then we can get closer to moving along to the demonstration portions of this session. So the Amicus, Outlook, and Exchange Calendar and Contacts link is a bi-directional synchronization feature that aligns your Amicus contacts, to-dos, and appointments with your Outlook and Exchange contacts, tasks, and appointments, respectively. You can configure the link to synchronize any combination of contacts, to-dos, or tasks, depending on how you want to refer to them, and appointments in either direction or in both directions. This Calendar and Contacts link is an ideal vehicle for migrating your data into Amicus Attorney, or large firms where all members use Outlook, but not all members use Amicus. Now, Amicus Attorney supports integration with either Outlook as a standalone, client-side integration, or Exchange, which is a server-side integration. So very much in the same line of thought as what the email integration offers us. And yes, Sonia, we will be doing a visual demonstration of all of the setup and everything here moving along in a few moments. Now, the link can handle firm member and people group assignments, file associations, and custom field synchronizations. You're welcome, Sonia. Configuration wizards, much like with the email integration, and as well, very much like a lot of the other integrations that Amicus Attorney offers. So configuration wizards, like I said, will guide the Amicus administrator and the firm members through the steps that are necessary for setting up and initializing the link. Information is provided on resetting the link and ensuring that the feature runs smoothly during that process as well. Now, the Calendar and Contacts link will synchronize your Amicus people with your Outlook and Exchange contacts, your Amicus appointments with your Outlook or Exchange appointments, and your Amicus to-dos with your Outlook or Exchange tasks, respectively. So from a basic configurations perspective, if your firm uses the Outlook standalone option without Microsoft Exchange, your Amicus administrator will configure the link to synchronize Amicus with the Outlook client on the firm members' workstations. If your firm uses Outlook with Microsoft Exchange, your Amicus administrator can configure the link to synchronize Amicus Attorney directly with the Exchange server. Dixie, to answer your question, you're not missing anything. As I've stated a few times here, we're doing an overview of everything here before we move along into the demonstration things, so I do apologize if there was any confusion on that side of things. But no, we have not left the home screen just yet. And Raul, to answer your question, you have 2 email addresses. You need to have one set up as your main email address. and that has the main profile within Outlook. Outside of that, if there's still issues that are going on there, the best thing I can recommend is that you reach out to technical support and have them take a look at things with you and help you to determine what is causing any issues you're experiencing and what needs to be done to resolve those issues. And again, you're welcome, Dixie. Okay, so moving along, we were talking about basic configuration regarding either Exchange or not Exchange. Let's touch upon synchronization direction. So each firm member can set the direction in which your records are synchronized during initialization. It can be set to one way, and it can also, the directions that new records and updates and deletions to already synchronized records are synchronized subsequently. Now, essentially, the link can be set to synchronize contacts in either both directions or one direction only, or simply not at all, if you choose not to do so. The same choices will be available to you for appointments as well as your to-dos or tasks. So you could set it so it only synchronizes your contacts but not your appointments or your to-dos. Or perhaps you want your contacts and your to-dos but not your appointments. So any type of flavor, basically, you can do. Now, synchronizations. Synchronizations will occur regularly depending upon your selected mode, either Outlook or Exchange, as follows. So for Outlook, very much like what we talked about with the email integration, when you first enable that link, through your preferences, that first synchronization is referred to as an initialization. And then, each time you start Amicus Attorney and log into it, based upon the options you've selected when you set up the link, it would synchronize with Outlook. It will automatically synchronize while you're logged into Amicus Attorney according to the optional sync period that you specify when setting up the link. Again, this is something we're going to demonstrate as we move along here, folks. When you choose Outlook, perform synchronization from the Tools menu in Amicus Attorney. Or you can choose Outlook Process Deletions from the Tools menu. And of course, there's the option, of resetting the link. Now, one thing to note here as well, if Outlook is not already running when you do a synchronization with Amicus, much like I mentioned with the email integration, it will trigger Outlook to start up in the background as a background process, and therefore you wouldn't necessarily see the Outlook icon on your taskbar to indicate that it's open and running. Now, much of these points will hold true with Exchange, but there's a couple of other things I want to mention here. When the Amicus administrator first enables the link for you, of course, again, that first synchronization would be an initialization, and then afterwards, it will synchronize automatically on a regular polling interval, regardless of whether you're logged into Amicus Attorney and regardless of whether Outlook is running on your computer. And of course, synchronizations would occur if the Amicus administrator resets the link for you as well. So that's a very basic overview, high level, of course, of the Amicus Outlook and Exchange Calendar and Contacts link. So we have one last thing to talk about before we get into the stuff that I think all of you are anticipating, and that's actually going through and demonstrating how we do all of this. So just one more talking point, folks, and then I'll get to the good stuff for us. So Outlook versus Exchange, which one do I use? So those who configure Amicus Attorney to support either email integration and/or calendar and contact synchronization through Exchange will enjoy the added benefit of always-on synchronization that occurs automatically based on a regular polling interval, regardless of, as I've mentioned earlier, regardless of whether or not you're logged into Amicus and whether Outlook is running locally on your computer. This is especially beneficial for those of you who have configured their preferences for auto-saving of your emails, for instance. Basically, because the Exchange link is a server-side link, Amicus Attorney and Outlook on the workstation really at that point have no bearing on the link's functionality at all, because everything is happening at your Amicus Attorney application server. So if you're not sure whether or not your email is Exchange-based, or if you use Outlook but know for certain that you're not using an Exchange account, well then using the Outlook option for these links is indeed recommended. Now if you are using Exchange, well then I highly recommend you go with the Exchange option. Plain and simple. It's just going to work out that much better for you. And again, those benefits that I mentioned are definitely worth making the switch. Now, please do note as well, if you're using the Outlook links, then the link is client-side, and therefore it is dependent upon Amicus Attorney and Outlook both being open and functional on your workstation. So again, these are the things to consider as far as pros and cons of each one. I can't say one is any better or worse than the other. It really comes down to personal preference and how you work. So that's our discussion point at this point, folks. So let me get rid of my fancy splash screen here. And let's bounce over here to Amicus Attorney and let's go through some of this stuff together. So to begin with, like I said, we're going to start with the firm setting side of things. So this is what your administrator within Amicus Attorney must take care of before you as a user can go into your preferences and set up the links. And this will hold true for even you administrators. This must be done before you as an administrator can go to your preferences and set up the links. So let's take a look at all of that. So regardless of whether or not your firm wants to use email integration, calendar and contact synchronization, or both, the firm setting side of the setup is the same, as it is one process for both links. So as an administrator, we log into Amicus Attorney like I have done here. And of course, if we haven't changed our preferences, we're taken directly to the Office module to the home screen. And so as an administrator, we have this additional section over here in our navigation panel on the left titled Administration. And in there, we have the second option being Firm Settings. These are firm-wide or global settings that will affect all of our users. So let's go there together and see what we need to do to get this all started. So as an administrator, we click on Firm Settings like so. And then over here, under Outlook Exchange Link, we must click on the Contacts, Calendar, and Email link configuration. In doing so, the Outlook Exchange Link Firm Settings dialog appears here for us, like so. At this point, we click on the Configure button. And for the purposes of our demonstrations today, I'm going to be using the Outlook Standalone option for the simple fact that it's more time effective, given the amount of time we actually have for this presentation, to be able to show off everything that I want to be able to demonstrate for you guys. But do note that outside of asking for credentials, the setup is pretty much the same. For Exchange, it's going to ask you for your email address and your password to establish that connection to your Exchange server. Outlook, it's not going to do that. So that's the biggest difference between the setup of the two. But outside of that, the rest of these screens are going to be the same for you. So I've selected Outlook Standalone here. And I will click Next. And so now what we need to do is map contact address labels. So here's the Outlook side of things. Here's the Amicus side of things. We've got Business, Home, and Other over in Outlook. Same thing over here in Amicus. So I can easily just do Auto, like so. And given that the options were pretty sparse and they were very easily matched up, you'll see that Amicus took care of that for me. So I will move along to the next screen. Here's where we're going to map our contact phone labels. And again, there's our Outlook side. There's our Amicus Attorney side. Again, to make life easy for myself, I'm going to click Auto, like so. It's going to match up everything that matches up, and we can proceed from there. So we'll hit Next here. And so now I'm being asked to map the contact web and or email labels. So email 1, I would tend to put that to business email. That's most likely the email address I'm going to be dealing with a lot of my clients with. But perhaps not, so then email 2 would go to home email, like so. Email 3, I'll put to other email. And my web page address, well, I'll put that to my business web. The odds are good that I'm going to run into more clients that have a business-related website than those that have a personal-related website. So I've done all of that. And again, you can map these however you really want to. I'm just giving you a demonstration and trying to rationalize why I've done things in the way I have. That is correct, Misty. Misty asks, we have a very small firm with just the 3 of us here. We all work out of the attorney's office in Amicus and non-individual ones. They all have different email addresses that they use, so she was thinking that this probably would not work for them in this regard. And you are correct, Misty. The way it's going to work, especially if you're on your own respective workstations, is if you've got these links, they're going to look for your Outlook profile. It's on an individual basis. So the attorney could set up the integration, but it would work for them, but not necessarily for you guys by doing it opening through another office. So in that sense, Misty, you're definitely correct. This probably would not be the best option for you guys in that sense. Like I said, it would work great for the attorney, but not necessarily for the rest of you. And yes, you can change the mappings, Steve. Yes, indeed. Sorry for that, Misty, but you're quite welcome all the same. So moving along here, we'll click the next button here. We've mapped our addresses, and at this point, we simply have the option to finish. So let's do that together. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is a very basic overview and demonstration of what you as an Amicus administrator would need to do to set up the firm setting side of things so that your users can take advantage of the email and contacts and calendar links respectively. And in this case, we configured it for Outlook standalone. Like I said, if we were to do it for Exchange, we would have an additional screen that asked us for some credentials so it could connect to our Exchange server. And then when we click Next, we would be taken to the rest of what we just saw as far as mappings and so forth are concerned. So let's say OK to that now. And just a few things that I wanted to mention here as well. I know I mentioned them briefly as we were going along, but again, I just want to make sure that I've made this clear for all of you, just so you're safe moving forward. So you want to specify how your firm is going to use Outlook with Amicus Attorney. So as you guys saw, when we first went into that dialog, and I'll just bring it up again here to reiterate this fact, when we go in here to do the configuration, our first option is to select whether we're using Microsoft Exchange or Outlook standalone. Keep in mind that Exchange is a server-side synchronization, Outlook is a client-side synchronization. So your best bet is to make your selection based upon what your firm is using. And if you're not sure, I would suggest making sure you find out that information are done beforehand. Again, where it's the server and the workstation, Dominic, this particular machine that I'm doing my training presentation on for you guys is my Amicus application server as well as my workstation. So really no difference in that regard. Again, it would boil down to what are you using. You can either go Exchange or you can go Outlook standalone. In most cases, a server, unless it's an actual workstation as well, may not have Outlook upon it. So I'll throw that out there too. But to answer your question as best I can, it wouldn't make a difference. So you're quite welcome, Dominic. So as I was stating here, you want to make your selection based upon what your firm is using. And like I said, if you're not 100% sure, maybe it's best idea to do a little bit of homework on that side of things before moving forward with this, just for your own peace of mind, if nothing else. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can have existing link users and then you could switch over to using Exchange, for instance. They could still be on Outlook, but your new users would be on Exchange. So let me go into a little bit of information on this as well. Let's talk about the effect on existing link users. So if you were to switch from Outlook to Exchange, any firm members who already have the Outlook client-side link enabled, they can continue to synchronize with that method. But any other firm members who would no longer be able to choose the Outlook link option. They would have to select the Exchange link option. Now, if you were to switch from Exchange to Outlook, any firm members who had the Exchange link enabled, well, they will no longer synchronize with that method. Their links will no longer be enabled, and the Exchange option would be removed from their preferences. So only the Outlook option would be available. Any scheduled Exchange link initializations or resets would be canceled at that time as well. So essentially, if you're going from Outlook to Exchange, the ones that had Outlook already, they'll remain intact. New users will have to go with Exchange. If you had Exchange and decided to switch to Outlook, basically every user is going to have to reconfigure their links, in a nutshell. And so that's the firm setting side of things, folks. I just wanted to add that little bit of context for you, just to, again, hopefully provide a little bit of peace of mind when it comes to this stuff as well. So we've talked about and we've demonstrated the firm setting side of things. And of course, we mentioned earlier, firm settings are global or firm-wide settings that affect all of our users. And they are restricted to our administrators within Amicus Attorney. So now that our administrator has done all of that stuff for us, then from there, we can go ahead and set up our preferences. Now, before I go ahead into the preferences, I did see that Martha had a quick question here. If we have a one-off email regarding a client, but the sender is not in Amicus, can the email be manually moved to? I didn't see the end of that question, Martha. But the best thing I can say is that if the sender, to move to Amicus Attorney. Okay, so I'm glad you added that, Martha, because it could have went in a couple of different ways, so I wasn't 100% sure, so thank you for that. So basically, if you have a one-off email regarding a client, but the sender is not in Amicus, you can still manually save that email to Amicus Attorney and associate it to the file you want to. That's not a problem. But if you wanted it to be automatically saved, again, the rule is for auto-saving emails, the email address has to be established or associated with a contact in Amicus Attorney. If it's not, then that autosave just won't occur. But you would be able to manually save that email to a file. Okay, so moving along here now, we're going to talk about preferences. And we're going to begin with the email integration side of things. And again, just to reiterate, folks, I'm going to be focusing on the Outlook link versus the Exchange link, as that's what we've set up in our firm settings. And again, I wanted to make sure that we could fit everything in to our 1 hour window here. So as a user, whether I'm an administrator or not, when it's time for me to set up these links, I must do so at my workstation where I have my Microsoft Outlook set up with my email address, my profile, however you want to refer to it, all taken care of. So Outlook's open here, it's functional for me, everything is good. So what I then do is, once I've logged into Amicus Attorney here, I'm taken to the Office module by default, again, if I haven't changed my preferences, of course. And so I would select preferences up here. And of course, given that we already talked about firm settings, we know those are firm-wide or global settings. Well, when we talk about preferences, these are user-centric or user-specific settings that are really only going to affect us, the user that is setting that particular preference. So we've moved along to our preferences here. And of course, given that we're talking about Outlook or Exchange links here, we're going to look under the link section over here in the lower right-hand side of our preferences. And here, under links, we're going to see email, and we're going to see calendar and contacts. So, like I said, we're going to begin by going through the process of enabling email integration. And so this is just going to be a walkthrough of the basic setup of things. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but we will go through a workflow of what is involved here. So again, you guys can see and have a good understanding of what is involved here. So if I select email, well, there is my Outlook Exchange email preferences dialog. And of course, my options, as you can see, none, Outlook on my workstation client side, and you'll see that Exchange is grayed out. And as it states here, our firm is not configured to use the Exchange server-side link. This option is unavailable to you. All right, so with that said, we will select the Outlook option. And again, do note that there's a link guide option here as well. If you click on this button, it will open up the link guide for the email integration. So let's take a look at these steps together here, folks. And do note as well, the current completion status is shown over here. So this might be a process you start, but not necessarily complete all in one shot either. Do note that that's something you can do, because life always gets in the way of life, and in your busy industries, things can come up very quickly, and your attention must be directed elsewhere, sometimes very quickly. So again, do note that this is not necessarily something you have to do all in one shot. You can do it in pieces and come back to it. So let's go through the steps together here. So step one. Well, this is where we specify our basic synchronization settings. So as you see here, we've got an option to limit the date range for unsaved email in the communications module to the last X amount of days. In my case, I've got it set to 7. This setting will affect performance. Sent unsaved email items do not display in the outstanding view, by the way. Now, there's an option here to show the embedded view of my Outlook mail in the communications module. So like I mentioned during the overview, there is an option to have an embedded Outlook view within your communications module by checking that option off. There's also an option to enable the Amicus taskbar within Outlook. Now, if you're using a POP account with Outlook, so you know it's not Exchange, and tends to be a POP account, well, then you can select that option, and then you can schedule an automatic send to receive to occur based on whatever you put in here. Robin, to answer your question, regardless of whether you're using Exchange or Outlook, as far as what your administrator has set up for you, you can either do email, you could do only email, you could do only contacts and calendar, or you could do both, or you could do none of the above. Whatever you choose as a user, it's completely up to you. Just by the administrator setting the options, all we really did was dictate which direction you have to go, essentially, when you want to use these links, whether it's Outlook or Exchange. But outside of that, we're not forcing you to use any or all of them. It's completely user preference based. So I do hope that answers your question. And so moving along here, like I said, we can set it to use a POP account. You're welcome, Robin. And we've also got options for auto delete here. So when a saved or unsaved email is deleted in Amicus Attorney, also deleted in Outlook or Exchange if I click that. Timer, I can start a timer when an email is created if it's associated with an Amicus file by checking that off. And of course, there's options here for delivery and read receipt. We can update those from Outlook by clicking there. And of course, this will determine, based upon our Outlook settings, if we've got it set to include a delivery receipt for any new outgoing emails within Outlook, then once we click that update from Outlook option, that would be checked off. Same would be true if we include a read receipt on any emails that we send out. So that's all we're doing there. It's not something you can set here necessarily. You're simply clicking the update from Outlook option to pull that information over. So at this point, I've made my settings here. I can click finish. And so that's step one. And as you can see over here now, the status is complete. So now step two, well, this is where I would go for attachment handling. So this is where I will go to specify how attachments are handled. So just a couple of things to mention here. If your document management is set to being user managed within Amicus Attorney, then you'll need to specify the default location for saving your email attachment by clicking on the Browse button and pointing to that particular location. Now, do note that this can be a folder that you create on your workstation, and it is recommended that you use a UNC path for that. Now, if your document management is set to Amicus Managed, such as mine is, then this is not required, and you'll see that your Browse button, much like mine, will be grayed out, because it's just going to save those email attachments in the shared documents location that we've specified in our firm settings already. So at this point, the last option I have here is whether I want to save attachments on unsaved email, also saving the underlying email with file association. So if I was to save an attachment on an email that has not yet been saved and associated to a file in Amicus Attorney, in doing so, I'm also saving that email and applying a file association to it, based upon whatever I've done with that particular attachment. So that can be checked off here as well. So at this point, I again would click finish, and as you can see here now, I've completed step two. Now step three, well, this is where we would specify our autosave settings that I mentioned earlier. So clicking upon that, you'll see right now, there's really not much to this screen, is there? Autosave email sent or received in my email program where the sender or recipient matches one of my Amicus contacts. Well, if I check this off, you'll see that this now appears here, and I can exclude any contacts. So I could click on this people selector, and I could say, you know what, if I receive an email from Roberta Boop here, please do not automatically save that email, by simply putting her in current selection like so. As well, I can check this option off to say if the email is for a contact that is on more than one file, don't automatically save that email. And as well, I can say include firm members. So I could say, by clicking on this, and I could select one of my firm members, like that. And I could say that any email that's been sent or received from Perry Mason or to Perry Mason, respectively, gets automatically saved as well. And of course, here's some autosave attachments options here. So you'll see I've got the option to autosave an attachment only if there's a file assigned, or never autosave attachments. So as I mentioned earlier, it is a requirement to autosave the attachment that there is a file association. And as you can see here, Amicus file assignment automatically occurs when the contact addressee is associated with only one of your Amicus files. So if that contact is on multiple files, please note that it's probably not the best idea to rely upon the autosave to get everything correct. It's going to automatically save the email to the contact, but not to all of those files, because Amicus has no way of determining which file in particular that email should be associated to. So it would autosave it to the contact, but from there you would be required to manually point it to the file it should be associated to. Again, that's only when we've got a contact on multiple files. Now I'm going to turn that feature off. It's not necessarily something that you have to have on or off. It's, again, a personal preference. So I just wanted to show you that I could leave it off as well and simply click Finish like so. And again, you'll see my status for step 3 is now complete. So at this point, step 4 is initializing the link. And so let's go ahead and do that together. So as you can see here, my options are, I check off this box here to say that I did indeed review the user guide. I'm currently logged into my customary workstation where my Outlook is configured, yes, and I am ready to proceed and begin processing my email. So at this point, I click Begin Process, and I'm going to do that in just a second here, but I do want to mention here as well some stuff in regards to Exchange. So if we were using Exchange, then at this point when we got to this screen, we'd be asked to set the start date for the autosave feature, and in doing so, any emails dated earlier than that date would not be automatically saved, but we could manually save them afterwards. We would then click off the remaining items in the list, much like we just did here, and then we would have a Send Sticky button here that we could click that would send a sticky message to our Amicus administrator advising them that we are ready for initialization. And at that point, the Amicus administrator would go into the firm settings, and where we set up the link initially, right underneath that will be an option for Exchange Management, which I'll try to show you here in just a second. So let's go ahead here and begin the process of initializing my email integration by clicking Begin Process. And as you can see, it's telling me I will need to restart Amicus Attorney before this change will take effect, that being that my email integration is turned on. So let's say OK to that. And at this point, my email initialization has been completed successfully. So I could say OK to that, finish here. And again, as you can see, all my steps are complete. Oriana, to answer your question quickly here, to have the autosave tool working, the sender and receiver both need to have Amicus Attorney. Not at all. The autosave is occurring in your Amicus Attorney. So whether the sender, let's say your client, was sending you an email, whether they had Amicus Attorney or not, won't matter in this case. The autosave feature is for you within your login instance of Amicus Attorney. That's it. That's all. So not a requirement for the other, either the sender or the receiver, to have Amicus Attorney as well. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, you're quite welcome, Oriana, was the setup from a preferences perspective for a user of the email integration. So let's close that. Now I will log out and log back in here, as stated, because it is best practice to do that as well, so I want to make sure that we demonstrate that. And so let's go back in there like so. And you will note that it was initializing my email there just a moment ago. So it will now initialize that connection during the login process. Jose, unfortunately, given the time constraints, I don't know that I'll necessarily be getting into going through the association of an email and so forth, but I will try to get to that towards the end of the session. I'll apologize if I'm not able to do so, but again, I will try to get to that towards the end of our session here. But again, let me just move along here quickly. Again, Jose, I will come back to you, so please hold on that for a moment. So very quickly here, we're going to go through the contacts and calendar setup. So again, we would go to Preferences, and then down to Links here, and there's our calendar and contacts. So again, we would select that much in the same way we did with the email. You'll note that we've got our options of Outlook or Google here, or none. Now, we're going to be strictly focusing on the Outlook side of things here, so I've made that selection. We'll click Configure. And so again, much like what we saw with the email integration, you'll see we've got multiple steps here that we need to go through and complete. So the first one here is our synchronization settings. So if we click on step 1 here, you'll see that I've got these particular options. Ask me each time if I log in, if I wish to synchronize with Outlook. If I don't do that, it'll just automatically happen. Synchronize automatically every, as you can see, I can go from 2, 5, 15, 30, 60, 90, or 120 minutes. I personally would not recommend anything less than 15. The underlying logic behind why I recommend that is because if you had an instance where you had a lot of information to synchronize, you could start a synchronization. It might take 15 minutes or more, and therefore it's not even finished before it's trying to do the next synchronization. So that's the real reason why I would suggest nothing less than 15 minutes. You go 5 minutes, again, the odds are good that it might not finish. So 15 is probably a pretty good gauge on that. Martha, I will show you towards the end of this webinar very quickly on how you can tell that as well. So we've made our settings here. We'll click Finish on that. So now we're on to step 2, which is our link preferences. So when a linked record has been changed in both applications, or when a new record has been created in both applications prior to a synchronization, we resolve conflicts by saying use Amicus data or use Outlook data. I'm going to stick with using my Amicus data. That's where I tend to do my updates. So that's going to be, in my mind, the most up-to-date information at any given time. So I would select Next here. So at this point, much like I mentioned to you guys earlier, we can set this contacts and calendar link to do our contacts, our appointments, and our to-dos, 2 of those 3, or only one of those 3 options. Again, it's going to be whatever works best for you. So with that said, let's go through here the first step, and that's for our people or our contacts. We can say no on that and we can proceed, or we could say yes. And in doing so, these additional options become available to us. We can apply updates from Outlook to Amicus. We can apply updates from Amicus to Outlook. You can check these accordingly based on your personal preference. There's no right or wrong here, but just do pay attention to what you've selected and note that that's how it's going to behave. Deletions, same thing. Apply any deletions from Outlook to Amicus. Apply any deletions from Amicus to Outlook. So same thing for updates and deletions. In both cases, if I update a record on either side, do I want those updates going to the other side? Same thing for deletions. If I delete a record on one side, do I want it deleted on the other? That's what I'm being asked to select here, essentially. And new contacts. Apply default assignments when synchronizing new contacts from Outlook to Amicus. So that's an additional option that you can select. So if you did create a contact in Outlook or in Exchange or on your phone or whatever the case may be, when it comes over to Amicus, do you want the default assignments that you've set in your preferences to be applied to that? That's what we're asking here. So we're going to enable our contact synchronization, so we'll just say yes to that. And we'll move forward here, including in the synchronization. I can select all people contacts, or I can say selected people and contacts by group. And then I can say include my active contacts. And you'll see as well, if I select the option for all people and contacts, I can include firm members by selecting that as well. By default, it does not, so just do keep that in mind. So we'll say next on that. So now we get to the options for our appointments. Do we want to synchronize our Amicus appointments? Yes or no? If we say no, it's grayed out, we move along. If we say yes, okay, well then direction and scope is our first option here. On initialization, do not synchronize appointments dated before. Well, in this case, we'll say June the 1st. And as you can see, I can dictate that date by selecting it from this particular calendar dropdown. And again, I've got my same options for updates and deletions. So I will make those settings accordingly, and I would simply click Next. My last option, link preferences for to-dos or tasks. So, again, I'll select yes on that. There's my initialization date option here. So again, I'm going to select June the 1st for me. So I want to make this as quick as possible for us. And there, again, our update options. So I've selected all of that. We'll say finish. And so now, again, my status is completed on steps 1 and 2. So let's do this for 3. So here's our field mapping. And of course, our administrator already did a lot of this in the firm settings. So a lot of this is just us clicking next. We can include some of these additional options if we want. And as you can see, that's simply a matter of clicking through and selecting any additional options that we might want. I might have rushed through that. I apologize, but I do note that we've only got about 9 minutes left here, so I want to make sure that I can show you guys the initialization here. So again, we're on completion for steps 1 through 3. Let's go to step 4. This is our initialization checklist. So again, much like we did with the email integration, we simply check off these options and let it know that we've done all of these things. We can select the option to initialize in one direction only, from Amicus to Outlook, if we so choose to do so. And then at that point, we can begin initialization. So I'm not going to go through that process because, again, I want to make sure that we meet our time requirements here. So again, though, very much like what happened with our email integration, when I click begin initialization based on the dates I've selected, it's going to go through, process, and initialize and synchronize those items, whether it's all of my contacts, all of my appointments, and all of my to-dos, or a subset of those, however I've configured it based on what we just went through. So that, in a nutshell, is how we would go about enabling the calendar and contacts synchronization. Now, actually, you know what? Let me finish this because I did want to show you guys how to reset and disable the links. So let's just do that right now. We'll begin initialization. I don't have a lot of data in here, so it shouldn't be too bad. And while we're waiting for that, I do see Steve added an additional question here. Sometimes I get a warning when the sync is running when I want to log out of Amicus. Is there a place I can check for the status of the sync? So basically, what you can do, as soon as this initialization completes, Steve, I've got some things that I want to try to show Martha here quickly, and I'm going to try to show you as well here in the time we have remaining. I'll show you where you'd be able to see that. I don't think I have my status bar enabled right now, so you'll just bear with me for a moment here. I'll show you where you would be able to do that. Okay, so I did get an error in this case. It's telling me to check the Outlook log from the Outlook menu, so I'll say okay to that, and there's my Outlook log. So at this point, if I'm unable to determine what this is telling me and what I need to do, I would keep this log open, and I would reach out to my technical support department here, and they would be able to remote in and take a look at this with me, determine what we need to do to clean this up, and get this to initialize successfully for us. So let me just say close to that. So again, you'll see my initialization was not complete, therefore my link has not been set up at this point. So I'm kind of glad we went through that example as well, because that gives you guys an idea of when things go awry, what needs to be done. So very quickly here, Steve, to answer your question, if you go to the View menu and select Status Bar, you'll see now I get this status bar at the bottom. And if there's an Outlook synchronization occurring, it'll give me that information down here where you're seeing right now. Outlook synchronization could not process one or more items. I hope that is kind of what you were looking for, because that, like I said, and now you'll see that that's disappeared. So that will give you an update. If there's a synchronization running, it'll tell you there's a synchronization running there. So that might be beneficial for you based upon what you've mentioned here. And Martha, you asked how can you tell who administrators are and what permissions they have. Well, if you're an administrator, you can go to User Management, and you'll see a list of all of your users. Oriana, that's not really something we get into during this particular session. I apologize. As far as if they're attached documents that you've saved and things like that, you'd either be able to see them on the file itself or in the documents module. If you're referring to the emails themselves, you'll be able to see them either on the contact that they're saved and associated to, or I should say, on the file that they're associated to. And to do so, you would go to the communications Brad view on the files. And Martha, just to wrap things, oh, you're quite welcome, Oriana. And so Martha, as I was stating, you can easily tell who is an administrator within the program by simply looking at the administrator column here. You'll see a check mark in the box for those that are administrators. And if you're wanting to know what rights they have, well, they've got administrative rights, basically full rights, but there could be restrictions based on a security profile. So that's where you would look at the security profiles. And for instance, you can see who is associated with a particular security profile from here, or you could do so through user management by simply selecting the user, clicking admin, and you'll see their security profile there. Stan asks, when a new file is opened in Amicus, the list of files in Outlook does not update unless I close Outlook and restart it. Is there a way to get it to update without closing Outlook? That should occur on a synchronization, Stan. Yeah, like that should update based on that next synchronization for you. If it's not and you're noticing that this is a regular occurrence, the only thing I can really recommend is to reach out to technical support. I can't say that I've heard of that off the top of my head, so unfortunately, it's not something I've experienced personally, so I don't even have an idea of, saying, hey, you know what, try this, see if it works, and if not, call support. Again, I haven't really heard of that being an issue in my experience here, so with that said, I don't really have much of a recommendation for you outside of reaching out to support if it occurs again, because then they can investigate and help you determine what's going on there. And so, Jose, we've got a couple of moments left here, and while I may not be able to fully demonstrate this for you, I'm going to do my best. So Jose had asked earlier, he mentioned, I have contacts in Apple on an iOS system. Can Amicus sync with those contacts and keep those? Well, yes, as long as they are set up or accessed through Exchange or Outlook. You can't connect directly to iOS, essentially, or anything like that. So to answer your question from that perspective, if you're able to synchronize your contacts, for instance, on your phone to your Exchange account, or you sync them to Outlook locally on your workstation, then you'd be able to synchronize those over to Amicus Attorney. And you also asked, can you please demonstrate how one assigns an email from a sender that is not in Amicus to a file? Please demonstrate how one can manually save an attachment to a file if a contact is assigned to multiple files. Well, there's a couple of ways that we can look at that, and given our time, I've got just a moment here. So if I was to go to the communications module here, okay, so here's some emails here. I'm on my Outlook view right now. So for instance, this email here is already that contact in Amicus. So let's take this one. I know that I don't have a contact for this. So I could simply select the email here and click Save and Associate, like so. And in doing so, it's going to ask me which file do I want to associate it to. So I would simply select the file like so, and I would hit OK to complete that process. It's as simple as that. Now, if there was an attachment on an email, let me see here. I do have an attachment on this one, so let me open that up. Actually, this one's already saved, so that's probably not the best example for me. I unfortunately don't have an email that's unsaved already that has an attachment to it. So, but basically, let me go back over here. Let me change my filtering here a bit. I'm just going to open up one of these emails from the All view, for instance, so you can see an email detail. Oh, that's a phone message, so that's a phone call. Dang. Bear with me here. Standing. Let me see today. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have enough examples in here to show that properly. I apologize for that, Jose. I hope that you were able to at least get the gist of that before we moved along. A couple more questions here to wrap things up, folks. Gregory asked, can you modify a firm member's preferences and reinitialize their email and calendar settings through user management? You can with the latest update, that being the 20.4 update here. I can go to user management. I can right-click upon a user and open user preferences. And you'll see there those options there. And on a busy file, before we implemented autosave, we could select multiple emails and associate them to a file. Now with autosave, it will often save the contact name. When we go to the associate all those emails on a file, Stan, again, I would recommend reaching out to technical support. I'm not sure what to say on that without seeing it and experiencing it and investigating it further. That's something definitely reach out to technical support, have them take a look at that with you and see what's going on there. Because I know you were able in the past to select multiple emails and associate them to a file. So I don't disagree with you by any means on that front. So whether there's something in this latest update has changed that or what the case may be, again, the best thing I can suggest is technical support on that. Jose, last question here for us today, folks. How do you manually, oh, you're welcome, Stan. How do you manually force a synchronization? Well, as we mentioned earlier, you can either do so by going to communications, and you will see there's a synchronize now option right here. Or I can go to Actions, Outlook Email, Synchronize Now. So that would be that. So that, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that we have definitely run out of time at this point, but that is the conclusion of our overview of the basics of the Outlook and Exchange links for both email integration and calendar and contact synchronization within Amicus Attorney. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention before we wrap things up, I do want to make sure that you're all aware of Amicus Maximus that is coming up very, very quickly in 2 weeks' time here, June the 24th through June the 26th at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you guys haven't already taken a look at this or already signed up to attend, please do visit abacusmaximus.com to take a look at everything. And if it does indeed pique your interest, then I do invite you to attend. We've got an amazing group of guest speakers that are coming, as well as all of us product trainers will be conducting sessions there as well, as you'll be able to meet some of the product management teams for the respective products, Amicus Attorney, Abacus Law, Hot Docs, and so forth as well. And do note as well that if you were to go to abacusmaximus.com right now and register, you can use the discount code of webinar to get $100 off your registration. And so that's that for my little plug on that side of things, folks. I do hope to see all of you there. And outside of that, it looks like we've reached the end of our session today. Thanks everyone for attending and participating in today's Abacus Next Free Training Tuesdays, Amicus Attorney, Outlook and Exchange Links Basic Sessions. Next week, or sorry, not next week, because next week we'll be in Las Vegas, but on Thursday of this week, I do hope to see you for our next session. That's at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it will be Amicus Attorney Reporting 101. So again, thank you all for attending, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day, week, and weekend to come. And again, all of you, thank you, and you're all welcome for those of you I was able to answer the questions for as well.